I subject you to disabling fire.
The wise warrior avoids the battle. The great strategist and Chinese author Sun Tzu writes in his book, The Art of War. While Sun Tzu may have written this in the 5th century BC, the lesson is perhaps still being learned by America the hard way. Because what else would explain why the United States continues to fight the Iran war despite getting stuck in the Hormuz stalemate, the massive military losses that it has suffered, and the rising domestic inflation. In a fresh escalation on Tuesday, U.S. forces conducted what they called self-defense strikes in southern Iran, while the U.S. Central Command saying that the military action was to protect American troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Iran warns that it will not let the violation of ceasefire by the U.S. go unanswered. It said that it will respond in a befitting manner and once again reiterated that Iranians are ready to make sacrifices when the need arises. But remember, this is not the first instance of military action since the ceasefire between Washington and Tehran was announced on the 8th of April. Later that month, U.S. Marines had seized the Tosca, which was an Iranian cargo ship, and then in May, both sides traded fire in Hormuz, with each side claiming that the other initiated the attack. Now, with the situation remaining status quo, as far as a deal is concerned, many are saying that this is a war that is fast becoming America's biggest foreign policy blunder. If the 2003 Iraq invasion was called a blunder, the Iran war has been termed the biggest U.S. foreign policy blunder so far. Much like the Iraq war, America began this war against Iran based on the presumption that the regime would fall and a new one will replace it. In fact, not just new, but a more moderate one as well. That hasn't happened so far. The names keep changing, from Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Iranian speaker, to the former president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who United States wants at the helm. Now, even though Mojtaba Khamenei's whereabouts and health status remain unknown, his messages that are played out on television reiterate Iran's unrelenting stance in this war. Now, amid this, Donald Trump has toned down in his serious threats against Iran. Instead, his words against Iran are now accompanied with an almost conciliatory statement. Take, for instance, his Truth Social post on nuclear dust. He said, and I quote him here, "The enriched uranium, nuclear dust, will either be immediately turned over to the United States to be brought home and destroyed, or preferably in conjunction and coordination with Iran." Now, from saying that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons to talking about a coordinated framework, the American president has realized that the Iran war has slowly become his presidency's Achilles heel. The peace deal still hasn't been announced. Neither side is divulging any details, and both sides are ready to pull the trigger at any point. The Hormuz, as we all know, remains under Iranian control. In fact, they now call it environmental cess instead of toll. While the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, stressed on how Iran has to open Hormuz, Americans know that if it had to happen, it would have happened much earlier. And in what is a setback for the U.S., Qatar has quietly shipped 3 LNG tankers to major buyers, including China, via the Strait of Hormuz. They reportedly did so after switching off their transponders to avoid any detection. Iran, meanwhile, has been upping the ante against the United States. In a written Eid al-Adha message broadcast by the Iranian state television, Mojtaba Khamenei said, and I quote him, "The hands of time will not turn backwards, and the nations and lands of the region will no longer serve as shields for American bases." His message points to what Iran says is the deterioration of American military power, something that former CIA Director General David Petraeus echoes. In an interview with Katz and Cosby radio show, the former CIA director said that he has seen a little indication that Iran is willing to soften its demands in the peace deal. In fact, General Petraeus also added, and I quote him here, "Another assumption which backfired against U.S. in fact is this." He said that I think we're in a difficult position and they know that. This is what General Petraeus has admitted. Now, this is another assumption which has backfired against the United States, that, it has underestimated Iran's response vis-a-vis the Gulf countries. Under this assumption, America thought that the regime would target American troops in countries aligned with the United States, like Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. But Iran did not hesitate in the horizontal escalation, and it hit all across West Asian countries. Now, in all of this, President Donald Trump's disapproval rating back home has hit its highest mark ever. According to a poll by Real Clear Politics, the slew of recent unfavorable polls has seen Trump's average job disapproval rating jump to 58.3%, which is much higher than what it was after the January 6th Capitol riots back in 2021. What happens next in this war is the million-dollar question, but before that, Donald Trump's second presidency needs to overcome not just its biggest foreign policy challenge, but its domestic opposition, its critics, and the American citizens as well. All right, shifting our focus now, China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region has been a key concern for the Quad, which is essentially a bloc comprising India, United States, Australia, and Japan. And now, in a big move to counter Beijing, the foreign ministers of the Quad members have jointly agreed to build a port in Fiji. Now, why is this so significant? Well, this is Quad's first ever joint infrastructure project since its inception. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong described it as the strongest ever commitment from Quad and highlighted its importance for Fiji.
We are also today announcing the strongest ever commitment from the Quad to the Pacific through the Quad Ports of the Future partnership, where we are launching a pilot for port infrastructure in Fiji. And I was in Fiji just a couple of weeks ago, and I know how important this will be to that country. It's a practical demonstration of our collective ability to deliver high-quality, resilient infrastructure in partnership with the region and in response to Pacific priorities.
Now, why Fiji? Well, Fiji is a key country in the Indo-Pacific region, and it is strategically placed between America and Asia. Being one of the 3 Pacific islands having a military, China has steadily ramped up its influence here. For instance, it is Fiji's 3rd largest trading partner, with their bilateral trade reaching $534 million in 2024. China has also heavily invested in Fiji's infrastructure, completing over 20 projects as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, which Fiji had joined in 2018. Considering that 60% of the global maritime trade passes through the Indo-Pacific, the Fiji Port Initiative is seen as a concerted attempt to keep a check on China and avoid a potential Strait of Hormuz-like situation. Owing to the virtual closure of the strategic waterway, the world is now witnessing a major energy crisis. This development is also vital from a security perspective. Remember, given that China unsuccessfully had tried to develop the Black Rock military base in Fiji in 2018. But this is not all. Last year, Fiji's Prime Minister, Sitiveni Rabuka, strongly opposed China setting up a military base in the Pacific Islands. During this meeting, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio highlighted why maritime security in the Indo-Pacific is so vital. Listen in.
Maritime security is so important beyond the fact that current events remind us of what can happen when maritime security is impeded, is the fact that 60% of global maritime trade passes through the Indo-Pacific, and it's a vital national interest not just to the 4 countries represented here today, but to dozens and dozens of countries, countless countries around the world.
Now, this drew a scathing reaction from Beijing, taking a swipe at Quad. China opposed the formation of the exclusive small blocs. It also cautioned against undermining trust among regional countries. Tuesday's meeting of the Quad foreign ministers was the 3rd such gathering of this grouping since September of 2024. On the occasion, they also launched the Indo-Pacific Maritime Surveillance Collaboration Initiative. This will enable the Quad partners to access real-time, unclassified satellite tracking data to combat illegal fishing, trafficking, and ensure a better humanitarian disaster response. Quad's thrust on the Indo-Pacific energy security was also clear, with its commitment to support each other's energy security needs during times of disruptions. Besides this, it also emphasized the need to protect undersea cable systems that form the backbone of the global digital economy. They agreed to provide tangible support to ensure that all Pacific Island Forum nations are connected via undersea cables by 2026. More importantly, the Quad also announced a critical minerals initiative to enhance the region's economic growth and security. As part of this, the bloc will invest $20 billion to bolster critical mineral supply chains. They pledge to implement coordinated measures to address unfair trade practices and improve the use of critical minerals from e-waste. On the sidelines of the Quad summit, India and United States signed a separate framework on securing of supplying in mining and processing of critical minerals and rare earths. Its joint statement had other crucial takeaways as well. For instance, it backed unimpeded freedom of movement in the Hormuz and the Red Sea and opposed the collection of tolls. It also condemned terrorism in all its forms and the terror attacks at Pahalgam and Bondi Beach. In an indirect message to China, the Quad also slammed the unilateral actions in the South China Sea, which threatened peace and security. The bloc has also reiterated its commitment toward denuclearization of North Korea. Now, while Quad seemed to have lost a bit of momentum after failing to hold a leaders' summit last year, today's meeting of the foreign ministers makes it apparent that it does remain a crucial grouping to deter China's expansionist tendencies. Donald Trump has opened a new chapter in West Asia's power politics. The U.S. president wants the entire Muslim world to take notice by calling on the Muslim and Arab nations involved in the Iran conflict. He wants these countries involved in the conflict or in the peace talks to end it and normalize relations with Israel under an expanded version of the Abraham Accords. Donald Trump did not make a general appeal. He named the countries directly. He said that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and Iran itself should join the Abraham Accords. For Trump, the Abraham Accords remain one of the biggest foreign policy achievements of his presidency. Remember, back in 2020, the deals brought the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco into formal diplomatic relations with Israel. At the time, Trump presented the agreement as a historic peace breakthrough. Donald Trump raised a high-level conference call to several Arab and Muslim majority nation leaders. The president told them that he expects them to normalize relations with Israel by signing the Abraham Accords as part of the developing U.S. peace deal to end the war with Iran. But the deals also changed the political rule book of the region. For decades, remember, many Arab and Muslim nations refused to recognize Israel until the Palestinian issue was resolved. The Abraham Accords broke this tradition. The agreements allowed countries to build ties with Israel without forcing Israel to change its policies towards Palestinians. And that, ladies and gentlemen, remains the biggest criticism of the Accords even today. Now, Trump wants to take that model further with the Abraham Accords 2.0, but this time the political scenario looks far more complicated. Gaza has become the defining issue across the Muslim world. More than 72,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's war in Gaza. Public anger against Israel has grown sharply across West Asia. Israel's military actions in Lebanon, Syria, and Iran have all further escalated regional tensions. And that is why many are now asking, why is Trump pushing this idea at this very moment? Is this a genuine peace initiative? Is it a diplomatic gamble? Or is it a diversionary tactic as negotiations with Iran continue to stall? Trump himself claimed that talks with Iran were proceeding nicely. Those are his words. But he's offered no clear sign that a final deal was to close. That has created a new theory among analysts. Some believe that Donald Trump wants to package an Iran deal inside a bigger regional vision, which is more pro-Israel. Even Trump allies have started framing it this way. Senator Lindsey Graham said that linking Iran to the Abraham Accords could create a new economic and security powerhouse in the region. But not everyone is convinced here. Ali Weiss of the International Crisis Group said that Trump appears to be presenting an Iran deal as a sequel to the Abraham Accords, something that looks good for Israel, good for the region, but tough enough for Washington. The biggest obstacle to this plan may not come from Iran. It may come from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And here's why. Saudi Arabia has repeatedly made its position clear. It will not normalize relations with Israel without a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. For Riyadh, the Palestinian issue remains central. For Pakistan, it has held the same line for decades. As the only nuclear-armed Muslim country, Pakistan has consistently said that it cannot recognize Israel until Palestinians receive justice and statehood. Qatar also presents a unique challenge. Remember, Doha has played the role of mediator in the Gaza talks, but its relationship with Israel remains deeply fractured, especially after Israel targeted Hamas negotiators in Qatar last year. So to sum it all up, Donald Trump wants to push the expansion of the Abraham Accords even further, but with Gaza still burning, the Iran talks uncertain and major Muslim powers holding their red lines. Abraham Accords 2.0 may just turn out to be Donald Trump's biggest West Asia gamble yet.